Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Evening Dhamma. Tonight we're looking at tonight we start into Dhammanupassana. Dhammesu Dhammanupassi viharati. One dwells contemplating the Dhammas, plural, in the Dhammas. And this word has been translated in this context. Of course, the word itself is translated many different ways, but in this context there are different translations. The most common one that I've always seen is mind objects, which isn't at all what it means. I'm confused as to why that was chosen. Mind objects as a translation for Dhamma is a very specific translation that is completely out of place in this context, from my point of view. It's a hard one to justify. The commentary doesn't do much to elucidate it. It says, well, now we've talked about Citta, so it's time to talk about Dhamma. So what is Dhamma? Well, it relates back to the 5 aggregates, the commentary says. We have Kaya Kayanupassi Viharati, mindfulness of the body. And that's the first, that corresponds again with the first aggregate. Vedana corresponds with the second aggregate, Vedana. Mind corresponds with Vijnana, consciousness, the 5th aggregate. So it says Dhamma corresponds with Sanya and Sankhara, or in order to elucidate these other ones, the Buddha taught Dhammanupassana. Now, clearly, this isn't all that's included in Dhammanupassana, or that's not exactly. That shouldn't be taken, I don't disagree with it exactly, but it shouldn't be taken to mean that Dhamma is only dealing with these second 2. And that's not what it says. It says in order to include these other ones. So the idea with Dhamma is there's something new that wasn't in the first 3. Even though there's going to be a lot of overlap. Framing it in terms of Dhamma is useful because this is the teaching. This is the path and the practice. So the 4th one is, again, like the things that we're going to, that are going to be involved with our practice along the path. As we practice, what we're going to encounter, what we're going to have to deal with, what we're going to have to cultivate. It's in many ways it should be translated as, or in some ways it can be translated as the teachings of the Buddha. I don't think that's quite the best translation, but it's important to understand that this one is going to be very interesting for us. The first 3 were like objects of meditation. The 4th one is more like a manual for as we progress. There's more to it. But I think probably the best translation of Dhamma is the main translation of the word, which is reality, something that holds its own reality. So Dharma is an interesting word. Dhamma is dhar, which means to hold. So it was used most commonly before the Buddha came along to talk about that which someone holds on to, a code or a creed. And so the various castes, the various, well, they tried to set up society so the various levels of society had their own way. It was an order. And so the nobles had their code, and it meant they could kill, but there were certain ways that they could kill each other. Then if they killed according to the Dhamma, the Dharma, then it was okay. Anyway, this was it. So that's where it evolved from, and then it evolved into, well, whatever this teacher teaches, well, that's his Dharma. And so then the Buddha had his Dharma, and people started talking, well, what's his Dharma? And the Buddha's answer was, my Dharma is reality. My Dharma is things that, not that I hold, but things that hold their own existence. So, and that's what reality means, of course. It's something that doesn't rely upon me to exist, right? All the thoughts and the concepts that I have in my mind, they rely on me to exist. Without me, they don't exist. And meaning they exist dependent on how I think about them. If I think about a person as being wonderful, well, suddenly they're wonderful. I can tell you all about this wonderful person I know, and how they do everything that just is so pleasing to me. But the reality, that's not reality. The reality is sometimes I meet this person and I get very angry. I go to see them and I think, oh, here's my good friend who I love. And then they do or say something that really makes me upset. And the difference between reality and conception. People don't exist. And this is the reason why it's a problem to think that they do. Because we get conceptions about this person. When a person is always changing, the reality is just a whole bunch of complex experiences that change in many different ways and clash with our experiences in many different ways. So that's dharmas. Dharmas are real, what's really happening, what really exists. Now, but this specifically is not all dharmas. It's the dharmas that are important for us. So it does have a sense of being the teachings. This is a very practical, this isn't supposed to be theoretical again. The 4 foundations of mindfulness aren't the best way of describing reality. The 5 aggregates are much better, and we'll talk about them. But the 4 foundations of mindfulness are a way of fitting the 5 aggregates into something more practical. And this 4th one is exceptionally practical. So that's a little bit that hopefully helps and doesn't confuse more about what Dharma is, because it's a tough one. We'll just keep it simple. Again, theory isn't the most important. It's important that we understand this part as the Dharma of the Buddha. Okay? So it starts by focusing on the hindrances, which is a good place to start. Of course, the Buddha wouldn't just pick something at random. So the hindrances are really the first thing a meditator has to deal with, and in many ways they're the litmus test of whether our practice is succeeding. Do you still have the 5 hindrances? Are they still consuming your mind? They're really all you need to contend with. So when we talk about progress, it's a bit of a mistake to think about gaining something. There is some gain, but it's much more difficult to grasp what we've gained than it is to grasp what we've let go of. Have the 5 hindrances reduced is really the best question you can ask yourself, because it's practical. And practically speaking, you can work on this. So if you come and you doubt the practice and you say, look, I'm not sure if this is doing anything, I can very clearly ask you if you have the 5 hindrances. If you don't have any of the 5 hindrances, then you're at the very top already. Either you're enlightened or you're fully accomplished in insight meditation, or else you're just deluded and think they're not there, and you're not really being mindful. That happens too. But this is what we have to focus on in our practice. These are the beasts that we're trying to hunt, I suppose, or one kind of beast. These are the enemies. This is the war that we're trying to fight. We're not waging a war against our thoughts. We're not waging a war against our bodies. We're waging a war against the hindrances, really. So the 5 hindrances, that's why they're called hindrances. These are the things that will prevent you from seeing clearly. These are what prevent insight from arising. So they prevent you talk about the goal and something good and some understanding. People complain about not getting progress, but most often these are the people who, well, these people have still difficulty with the hindrances. So often a lot of doubt. And doubt is, well, we'll talk about them, but doubt doubt can be useful. I mean, it's not wrong to doubt things that are worth doubting, but we often have doubt as a default. You know, we're averse to believing anything. We're averse to accepting anything, to the point, even sometimes, that it blinds us to what is actually happening. We see the truth and we still continue to doubt. Anyway, we'll talk about these in order. The first one, sensual desire. So this is a big one, right? This one we see right away. You want to sit in meditation, but instead your mind is like, it's like a baby cow. The Visuddhimagga talks about this baby cow, an ox maybe, that you want to train it, because actually oxen are quite smart and they can be trained. So you take it away from its mother, and you pound a stake into the ground, and you tie a rope to the stake, and you tie another rope maybe to the ring in its nose, or I don't know how that works. And this cow runs around and runs around and runs around, but because the rope is there and the stake is firmly planted, it can't. It just gets tired, you know. And once it gets tired, it rests. It goes and sits down, and then it's ready to train. And so this going out to the mother, thinking only about the mother's milk, this is sensual desire. You'll be practicing, and your mind is just like a baby, thinking about things that, you know, it has no reason to be thinking about. Wanting things that are just ridiculous. So meditators will get so obsessed with simple things like cheeseburgers or cheesecake or chocolate, or they start naming these. And I remember one meditator who was just craving bread, because in Asia there's a lot of rice, and it was just what she would give for some nice German bread. Well, this is what we're seeing. It's like withdrawal in many ways, right? This is like detox. You're in this hospital, and you're going through withdrawal, which is great, really. It's a chance to sober up, and this sobriety is so powerful, so much more than sobering up from drugs. Although in many ways it is drugs, right? What we're talking about is brain drugs. Dopamine, what are they? Serotonin, I don't know what are the important drugs in the brain. And we're steeped in them, and we know exactly how to get them. I see this, bing, and my brain drugs give me the shot, the hit. I get the hit of brain drugs. And so it's really just a drug addiction, which when you think about it, really it's a good thing to be free from. It doesn't seem like it to the drug addict, but it's really relieving, you know. Many meditators, they'll leave, even if they've just been here a short time, they'll leave and feel cleaner, like they've cleansed something about themselves, because really that's the brain becoming unpickled. The second hindrance is vyapada. Vyapada is ill will. Usually has to do with people, but I think in this instance we can take it to mean any kind of aversion in the practice. Aversion to sights and sounds and smells and tastes and feelings and thoughts. So these two are these are the big ones. These are the ones that are going to hound you. Liking and disliking. They're not everything. All five are important, but well, liking and disliking, they're the pair, right? Liking for things that are good, disliking for things that are bad. These are the tools. We're such wretched creatures that these are the tools that we have to interact with the world. For the most part, these are the only tools we have. Good? Okay, like it. Bad? Okay. Dislike it. And that's all we know. And it's very easy then for the other hindrances and defilements to breed, to become views and egos and conceit and fear and worry and anxiety, depression. All of these mental illnesses, many mental illnesses come because we just don't have the right tools. We think somehow getting angry about things is useful. I mean, it makes sense from the outset because that's the impetus to run away from it. If you anger and aversion, it's a good way to escape things, even if it just means yelling at someone so they be quiet, right? Or scaring them away, chasing them away. Go away, I don't want to see you again. It's a good way to get rid of them, right? But the problem with it, and the problem with all of these, is they become habitual. And so what this section says is, this is an important, the hindrances is a really important section besides the obvious reasons, but it's important because it shows, along with Cittanupassana actually, I didn't mention it, but it shows that we're not trying to avoid these things. We're trying to understand them. And that's necessary because they're habitual. You can say, okay, I'm going to practice and not get angry and not want anything, not have any of the hindrances arise, and either you force yourself, which has problems of its own, or you fail. You can't because they're habits. They have a power to them. They have a power of the repetition, power of the inclination. They have changed you with their power. So it's something that takes work. You have to keep up at it and be patient with it and not try to judge them. Just try to learn and to change, to change the direction. And so with ill will, the same. We're not trying to feel bad about getting angry or avoid getting angry. But when you are angry, be aware of it, how it arises, how it ceases, what it causes, what it's caused by, knowing when it's present, knowing when it's not present, what makes it present, what makes it not present, understanding the five hindrances. Know your enemy, right? If you know your enemy well, it has no power over you. The third hindrance is tina midha, which tina and midha, they're a mental. The sloth and torpor, they're often translated as, but they're mental fatigue. It's important to distinguish between physical fatigue, because you can be tired physically and your mind is clear. You're still falling asleep, right? But sloth and torpor is more like a laziness in the mind. Laziness might be the best way of translating this. This sort of, oh, I don't want to, I don't know, I don't care. This kind of drowsiness, I suppose, as well. But the sort of, the mental torpor. So when you feel, no, it's also drowsiness, but it's mental, right? But so the physical, your body can be I don't know, can your body be tired? That's a good question. I might be wrong there. It doesn't really matter. When you're tired, you just say tired, tired. But the question of whether it's always a hindrance, I'm not convinced that it is. Because arahants sleep, right? Arahants sleep. The Buddha did. I'm not sure if the Buddha slept or not. But so if an enlightened being sleeps, then does an enlightened being get tired? No, I think the difference is there's no feeling of tired. The difference is it's just, now I'm going to sleep, and then there's sleep. It's a difference. When you feel tired, right, this is tinamida. And it's a hindrance because it prevents the clarity of mind. So you have to say to yourself, tired, tired. The body doesn't feel tired, right? It's like the body doesn't feel pain. That's only mental. It's like a rock can't feel tired or feel pain. Why? Because it's the mind that feels it. So the actual feeling tired, that's the hindrance entirely. And so you get rid of it. I mean, it's true. When you, through the practice of meditation, you get to the point where there is no fatigue. You break through it. The body can't feel tired. It's not the body that's feeling tired. Well, it's a good question whether like there's certain medication that makes you drowsy. So how does that work? I think it preys on your own, on this hindrance. And if you didn't have the hindrance, it might just put you to sleep. No drowsiness, just sleep. It's interesting. It's an interesting question. These are interesting questions when Buddhism comes up, because we have a lot of knowledge in the West about how the brain works and so on. I don't have all the answers. I think it's not so important, again, because with all these things, we're not here to judge them. Is this a hindrance or is it not? We're here to see them, to understand them. And so either way, you just say to yourself, tired, tired. The fourth one is uddhacca and kukucca, which are actually two different things. Uddhacca is restlessness, and kukucca is worry. Kukucca means worry. It's often associated with feeling guilty about things. Uddhacca is just where the mind is not focused, the mind is not still, jumping here, jumping there. But they're related, right? They're both delusion-based, and they both have the effect of keeping the mind from being still. There's restlessness, where the mind is jumping, thinking about this, thinking about that. Distraction, you can also call it. And then there's worry, where the mind is agitated by something, anxious about something. But it is important with all of these to differentiate from the body and the mind. Of course, the body and mind are related, but it's important because otherwise the physical will instigate the mental, right? As I've talked about many times, if you feel the physical manifestations of, say, anxiety, it's quite common for that moment of experiencing that to make you more anxious. You feel the tense stomach and the heart beating, and that makes you anxious. And doesn't have to, is the point. If you can change the way you look at it, clearly any meditator can experience this. When you're anxious and you say anxious, and then when you feel the feeling, and instead of anxious you say feeling, feeling, and just remind yourself these feelings of tension or tense, are just feelings, then they don't make you anxious. They don't stop, but they slowly go away on their own because you're not feeding them with more anxiety. Instead of it spiraling out of control where you're paralyzed through the panic attack. So separating out the physical and the mental is important. Worry and restlessness or distraction, these are mental. Remember one monk told me that arahants don't yawn. Now that I think about it, this is an interesting one because he said arahants don't yawn. So I guess he's of this school, and I guess the orthodoxy is probably that arahants don't get tired either. I don't know. Not entirely convinced. But it's a tough one. And the fifth one is vichikicha, which means doubt, uncertainty. Doubt is really the worst. If you have doubt, you can have doubt about, again, things that are worth doubting, but it's still a problem. If you're doing something and it's the wrong thing to do, you'll doubt about it, naturally. But that's bad. It's bad because it's a sign that the thing you're doing is bad. It's bad because no matter what you're doing, if you doubt it, you won't meet with success. So it can be useful because the thing you're doing might not be worth doing, and doing it might not lead you to good things. But thereby the doubt is a sign. The point being, I guess you could also say that faith in things that are bad is also very dangerous. But I would argue that it's impossible to have true faith in things that are bad. People talk about having faith in this or that, but they're actually just forcing themselves and suppressing the doubt, which is certainly possible. I mean, there are many ways to suppress doubt. But in mindfulness practice, all of these things, we allow them to come up. We challenge ourselves to experience the things that give rise to the hindrances without actually giving rise to the hindrances. Right? To experience them without the reaction. And doubt, there's so little to doubt in Vipassana. Someone who doubts mindfulness practice clearly has a doubt problem. Which is common. Many people do have a doubt problem. But that's an important point to make. That what can you doubt, If I were telling you there's a flying spaghetti monster up in space who's fulfilling your every wish, that's worth doubting. But we're telling, the Buddha said, when you see, know that you're seeing. It's very hard to doubt that. But as with all the hindrances, this is like like blotter paper, right? This paper that I don't know if that's the right word, but those litmus paper, I think is the word. This allows you, when you practice in this way, it shows you everything. It's like the hunter waiting for his prey or her prey. You don't have to run around. When you practice this, all these things are going to come up. It's like bait. We're baiting them. And so definitely doubt will come up during the practice. It's important for us to be clear is that there's nothing to doubt. Be clear that the doubt is the problem. Doubt is often the problem. And try and be clear that it shouldn't be a question of, is this good or is this bad? Because what we're here to do is give up doubt. What we're here to do is not give up doubt about any one thing, but just that. To stop doubting anything. And in many ways that means to stop believing anything, right? Because if we say give up doubt, well, does that mean I just have to believe things unconditionally? No. In many ways it means stop believing anything at all. Stop with belief. Buddhism isn't about belief, it's about overcoming doubt, really plain and simple. So it has to do with reality, which of course is a loaded word, but shouldn't be, because these realities are simple. Seeing exists, hearing exists. You can't deny that reality. And so when you're clear that seeing exists, that's about as far as you have to go. If only we could just be clear that seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling and thinking exist. I remember I had one student who was a Hindu background, and boy, she had crazy ideas. I still have the doubt as to whether she was entirely there. I don't know what the right word is, but I think something was crazy in her brain, because she came to me with all these crazy stories. Things happening to her that I'm really not sure that any of them actually happened, but like her clothes were stuck to the ceiling or stuff. Really bizarre things that just out of left field for the most part. But I kept saying to her, there's only 6 senses. That's seeing, or it's hearing, or it's smelling. So any crazy thing she came to me with, I just kept telling her. It still doesn't escape seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. And it was very much able to counter any challenge. Hey, what about this? This is something extraordinary. No, it's just still seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. If you understand that, there's nothing to doubt. That's it. All of the rest of the Buddha's teaching, it can be such a catalyst for doubt, because it's complicated, and books tend to be very complicated. They're trying to explain something, and they're useful for that. But if you focus on them, the problem is not the books. Books are useful, they're helpful. The problem is how you use them. Do you then focus on the book and say, this book uses this word, says this, right? We have to use books. We don't have the Buddha around, but we have to use them to practice, and use them as useful things, not as Bibles. Anyway, so those are the 5 hindrances. If you can free yourself from them, not by suppressing them, but and that's the easy way, right? Just to suppress them, which is valid. It's a valid meditation practice, but it's not the end. And that's not this practice. This practice is not suppressing. This practice is understanding how they arise, how they cease. The Buddha says very clearly in this section, which makes it very important. We're not trying to avoid or suppress them. We're trying to fully understand the truth of them and free ourselves from them completely by seeing that, hey, look, these are not useful, these are not helpful, these are bad habits that I've developed. So there you go, there's the Dhamma for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll go and see if there are questions. Yesterday I went to Toronto, Mississauga. We had this yearly, turns out there's a yearly meditation in the park. Oh, we have lots of questions. I'm planning on ordering the entire Pali Canon. I heard you say that one should read the first book. Proceed. Oh, I think you're confusing things. The books I said to read are my books, the ones that I wrote. Read the first book I wrote, then do a meditation course, then read the second book that I wrote. Which actually isn't entirely finished yet, may never be finished. But the Tipitaka is many, many books, and reading them all is a huge undertaking. I don't understand what a meditation course can provide if one has read your booklet and applies it. Is it the structure that is the value, the accountability of someone being there when you think you want to leave? Oh, or maybe you aren't confusing them. Not sure what that has to do with the Pali Canon, but I don't understand what a meditation course can provide. Well, it's intensive. There's so much. So meditation course, you just have to try it. I mean, or maybe not. Meditation course is structured, but is intensive. Really intensive is the most important, and the structure allows you to the intensivity, and it allows you to stay on track. Yeah, so the accountability, but also the teacher, someone who can keep you on track, who can push you back on track when you get off track. How did samsara started in the first place? Well, we don't have an answer for that. There isn't understood to be a beginning. Time doesn't work that way, apparently. What is the true nature of fear? Fear is based on anger. It's an aversion, not anger, but it's an aversion mind state. So there's a disliking involved. I had an argument, I've talked about this before, but I had an argument with an Abhidhamma person once, and he said, no, fear is just delusion. And I said, what? Fear must be based on aversion. And he said, no. So I tenaciously stuck to my guns, and I was just bantering it back and forth, and he said, okay. And he came back a day later, and he said, I talked to an Abhidhamma expert, and he agrees it's just delusion. He said, he verified, it's just delusion. Still wasn't convinced. It didn't convince me, and so I went to. Well, I didn't go. I actually, or maybe I did. At some point, I hit upon something. I went to the Visuddhimagga, and not that we have to believe what anyone says, but these people are very much invested in the orthodoxy. So I went to the Abhidhamma and looked at the Abhidhamma, and it talks about Bhayanyana. It says, in Bhayanyana one isn't afraid. Or I said the commentary, the Visuddhimagga, I can't remember, but the Visuddhimagga or its commentary. So the Visuddhimagga says one isn't afraid. I'm pretty sure that's in the Visuddhimagga. But I think it's in the commentary that says why that is, what the difference is. So sorry, Bhayanyana is something called, Bhaya means fear, but it can also mean danger. So in this case it doesn't mean fear, it means knowledge of fearsomeness. Like when you see a fire burning and blazing, you think, boy, if I fell into that fire that would hurt me. But you're not afraid of the fire, you're just aware of the danger. Or if you see a poisonous snake, you don't have to be afraid of it, you just know that that's dangerous. So it's starting to see the danger of clinging. As you watch and you see how you suffer, you say, wow, there's real danger to this, I better do something about it. And anyway, the commentary of the Visuddhimagga says real fear has anger associated with it. So anyway, I won. I was right. I mean, it just seemed strange to think it had nothing to do with aversion. So the commentary to the Visuddhimagga agrees. We objectively concentrate on the breath, bringing awareness back to it once distractions are gone, but when a distracting thought arises, we deal with it by objectively concentrating on the thought until it dissolves. Yes. Using the same strategy, objective concentration, expecting two different results? I see. No, I mean, we're not... we're focused... Well, thoughts are different. Thoughts do arise. We're not trying to make things dissolve. They dissolve by themselves. And you do the same with the breath. The breath isn't a thing that exists. The rising exists, and then it dissolves. It's a momentary thing. I mean, that one's easy because it's come and it's gone. And then the falling is come and gone. But the thing is, it repeats. And because it repeats, it's useful to go back to. We're not expecting two different results. The same result. The rising dissolves, the falling dissolves. And the rising, and then dissolves. But because it repeats, it's an easy... it's an easy beginner practice, like training wheels in many ways. Or, it's just a base for us to come back to because it's reassuring, it's always there, it's simpler than running around trying to find the tiger in the jungle. Does attachment have a quality of heaviness to it? Maybe that's physical, you're thinking. Attachment doesn't have heaviness or lightness. Attachment has pulling and yearning nature. Wouldn't worry too much about particulars like that. Whatever you experience, try to note it. If it's a feeling of heaviness, then note the feeling of heaviness. If you're clear that this is something you want, in fact, attachment isn't really a thing, but it's the wanting or the liking that you have to note. Can you scratch an itch during formal meditation? Yeah, just be mindful. Rubbing is rubbing is more advised. Definitely better you just say wanting to scratch, raising, rubbing. For the past 2 months, as soon as I close my eyes to meditate, I instantly feel pressure on my left eyelid. Is it an indicator that I'm doing something wrong? No. No, I mean, there is no indicator that you're doing something wrong. The indicator that you're doing something wrong is the 5 hindrances increase. Even then you have to be careful because this is like nauseous gas that we're letting up, so it is going to increase. You wouldn't feel so frustrated if you didn't do meditation, right? But you'll see how you get frustrated about something. Worried about this, say. Suppose you were worried about this. You're trying to make it change or something, so you talk about that kind of progress. The only progress is you should stop obsessing over it and worrying about it. The feeling will come or will go as it pleases. It has nothing to do with you. It's not listening to you. The point is how you react to it. Can an enlightened person become unenlightened? No. Regarding what you said tonight about anxiety, the feelings don't cause anxiety. They just go away on their own. Does this imply that once we feel we have stopped the anxious thoughts, we should just ignore the feelings? Should we concentrate on the feelings until they are actually gone? No, you don't ignore things. Stay with them, and after some time, if they don't go away, then you can ignore them. But stay with them for a while. Don't ignore things, except if they last or they keep coming back, and even if they keep coming back, But if something's there for a long time, after a long time, you can ignore it. What's the true nature of boredom? And these true nature questions, it's a theme. True nature of boredom, again, anger. It's an aversion. Boredom is just a wish you were doing something else, and aversion towards what you're doing. It's just another name for aversion. Often caused by desire. You want to be doing something else, and then you look back at what you're doing, and you got to do it, and there's an anger. Maybe a little bit of laziness as well, or tiredness as well. Okay, and that's all the questions. That's all for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night.